Alright homies, this week's car review is a 2015 Mitsubishi Outlander 3.0 SAWC. And I'm sitting inside it right now. I believe it has a relatively stylish exterior. You know that I love the color red, so that wins a point in my book. However, the interior is rather stark, in my opinion. It kind of feels and looks very bare bones to my eyes, because you know I always look for technology features in vehicles, and pretty much everywhere on the planet. It reminded me a lot of the Mitsubishi Outlander Sport, which I drove a few weeks ago. This is different though, it's a little larger, but still very ample. The MSRP for this particular model and package is $35,000. And there really wasn't a lot of tech in the car, so to speak. Not a lot of extra features. I mean, features that were there and nice to have, but certainly I felt like a few things were missing. There are virtually no safety bonuses apart from the car being safe as a vehicle and how it's constructed in terms of usability and how someone might find the vehicle intuitive in terms of keeping them safe. The backup camera worked, although the nav screen was relatively small. I would have expected it to be larger, especially in a larger vehicle. One of my bigger challenges in driving this car wasn't necessarily the drive itself. That was fine, and I'll get to more of that in a second. It was that I always seemed to misjudge my size, and I had no easy way of telling how big I was. That really became a problem, especially when I went to park. I also found it difficult to hear the car when it locked, especially if I was like 20 feet away in nature. I couldn't hear it, and so I'd have to walk back to make sure I did lock the car, or look back for a visual sign that I had locked the car with the lights flashing. It was very muted. That's not necessarily a feature that some people would look for or listen for. It was just something that stood out to me as something that didn't necessarily get thought all the way through. But maybe I'm the only person who uses his key fob to check where his car is. Come on, admit it. You've walked around a parking lot going, you know, with the key fob in your hand, not just, you know, like that. Just imagine the key fob's in my hand. It's in my pocket right now. The door handles worked fine from the outside, but I noticed that it was sometimes difficult to know when I was unlocking the driver door and then specifically the passenger doors. Like I had to keep trying with the button on the handle out there and never seemed to get it right. The trunk door, however, was very intuitive. You could unlock it specifically from the key fob, which I also still do not have in my hand. And then it has a button on the trunk, so you can press it to shut the door as well. While we're on the topic of the trunk, that is probably one of the car's most unique features, a convertible trunk. See, you could use it as a trunk space, or the seats fold back just in case you have to have space for transporting people with very short legs. The back area is currently functioning as a trunk, but if we needed to, we could convert that trunk into another back seat. It's just that there's not a lot of legroom. I don't think they call it a lane keep assist feature, but an odd option that I always had to turn off every time I turned on the car was the LDW option, which would warn you if you were going over a line. Inevitably, I never really needed that help. And it was kind of weird that I would turn it off and then turn the car off, and then when I turned the car back on, the feature was on again. Like, I want it off. I'm good to go. But the radar cruise control with the feature built into the steering wheel to toggle the length at which you can drive behind the vehicle before it adjusts your speed. Very nice feature to have. You know, I love radar cruise control. Since I'm not really a car guy, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm the only person who looks at these cars and shares their experiences who notices these small things. It was a relatively comfortable drive. The steering wheel seemed to float along okay. Is that the terminology I'm supposed to use here? I'm not sure. It's powered by a V6 engine, but I'm not sure if it felt too powerful when I was driving at higher speeds. I'm not sure if that's a benefit or a drawback, but I thought that bigger vehicles would need to have more power. The acceleration was smooth. I appreciated that, if only because I never really had any herky-jerky starts and stops. There's a small roof window up top, and it opens. Fresh air. Okay, enough fresh air. My wife, Diana, didn't necessarily have any remarks in terms of when she drove the vehicle, although she said it was relatively comfy in the back seat. Speaking of back seat, Jedi's got a new baby seat, and this one has a higher profile than the previous one, and I found it difficult to keep the baby seat on this side, though we didn't necessarily move it because, well, it came time for me to do the review, and then it was too late to move it. But I didn't really think that it was smart to keep it here because it blocked my view, and checking the blind spot became more difficult because there are no warning lights in either of the side mirrors. I'm the kind of person who likes riding in a car, not necessarily driving it, but just in case you wanted to shift gears manually, you could do so with the pedals on the steering column right behind the steering wheel. It was a good sound system, a decent nav system, nothing necessarily to write home about, but it worked. I really didn't pick up on any digital niceties. We're talking about analog gauges here. So who, you may ask, is this car for? A small family with mediocre needs who have kids with friends that you might need to transport there in the back seat, not the trunk. You have to convert the trunk into the back seat. Make sure you do that. Although when I was a kid, we used to ride around in the trunk. Someone who doesn't want a compact car, or someone looking for an okay vehicle to get them from point A to point B. Or point B to point A. So who, based on my experience, do I think this vehicle is not for? Someone looking for intelligent tech integration, someone looking for intuitive safety features in terms of usability in driving the car, not the actual car itself, or someone who wants to enjoy the interior as much as the actual drive. I just don't know how else to put it. I found this relatively janky. It's the cigarette lighter adapter power thing, but it's not a cigarette lighter anymore. But why did I pull it out? Why wasn't it just a flap? As a reminder, if you want to see any driving footage or footage in the car in general, you should tune into the Pirillo vlogs, which we're doing every day in the Pirillo vlogs channel. Because to me, that's as much of a review as anything else. Seeing someone use it in real life, not just for a review. No matter. Thanks again for liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, watching even more of our videos right now. And at this point, I'm going to leave you to your own devices.